時間になりましたので、第3セッションを始めたいと思います。第2セッションの最後では、企業がですね、自社のために自社の自分の会社の記録のために設置した企業アーカイブスとは異なって、クローディアがアンサルド財団がさまざまな企業の資料を保存・公開している事例を取り上げました。でこのように企業資料には一つの一市企業の記録という意義を超えて社会が共有する歴史的な財産であるという位置づけがなされている例がたくさんあります。で第3セッションでは、企業資料とナショナルストラテジーというふうに題しまして企業資料に関する全国的な戦略の事例をご紹介します。で中国とイギリスの例を取り上げます。最初に中華人民共和国国家档案局経済科技档案業務指導士副市長王蘭さんに、資産概念の導入と中国における企業記録管理へのその効果と題してお話しいただきます。先ほどランさんのペーパーが英語のものですけれども少しプリントしてあるので、配布できますということをお話ししましたがもしまだ少しありますのでもし欲しい方はちょっとお手を挙げてください。そしたら配りに行きます。それで、ランさんの日本流に言うと王さんですけれども王さんのご紹介は小冊子の30ページから31ページにあります。じゃあ、お願いします。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be here to support the Japanese people in this suffering time and appreciate the organizers' hard work for preparing the symposium. Also, I appreciate the participants in Symposium attending. I know some of you even come a long way from outside Tokyo this morning. Thank you. My presentation, the introduction of asset concept and its effect on business record management in China, is focused on some record management development that based on the concept change in China, archival and record management community. There are three parts of this presentation. Part one is transformation of economic system and its effect on record management. As you may know, before the 1992, in China, we adopt planned economy. But after 1992, we adopted the market economy. So, for the cognition of records, we have some evolving. So briefly, in 1960s, China began to regard business records as a necessity of research and production. In 1980s, we established awareness of records as a resource of information. So just a brief mention, because it takes it too long. After 2000, China began to regard information as essential productive factors and intangible intellectual assets. When international consensus about the role of records as the asset was adapted into the ISO 15489 records management. Now it is widely believed that tangible business property must be documented, evidenced, and protected with records, while mostly intangible business property is also believed none but resided and presented by the records. So for example, during the business meeting, the director of the provincial branch of a famous Bank of China is said that records should be taken as seriously as cash, and thus the construction of a records repository be as scrutinized as that of the coffer of the bank. So they also change the view about the records. The second is a regulatory compliance requirement of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. As you may know, the Enron and Anderson scandal and the bankruptcy of 2001 resulted in the concept of compliance requirements that is stated by the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002 by the American Parliament, I think. That these two companies was charged the accusation is obstruction of justice for inappropriate record destruction. That's directly related with the records management. So the requirements was made an amendment into the U.S. Code, Crime and Criminal Procedure. For example, in Article 1519, destruction, alteration, falsification of records in federal investigation and bankruptcy. This article says, whoever knowingly alters, destroys, mutilates, conceals, covers up, falsify, or make a false entry in any record should be fined and this title, imprisoned not more than 20 years. Also in the Article 1520, I don't read it for the time reason, just mention the title, destruction of a corporate audit record. And this is the first time in the U.S. Code, including the electronic records that you must keep. This is Enron. And recent years, a lot of consulting companies issued some white paper just directly related to the record management. For example, this white paper said, the title, Improving Corporate Governance Through Compliance and Assured Record Management. So, you know, right now, the record management is as good, is very important. The consultant also shows the position of the record management. They made a dependency pyramid. We can find the record management, compliance, governance, enterprise risk mitigation, directly linked. Also in China, in recent years, we also adopt some regulation. It's by some press and reporter said is a C means China, C SOX. Its name is the basic rule for enterprise internal control It's 2008 issue. For one article said, enterprises should establish a management system as well as records of the property of goods to safeguard business assets. For Article 47, enterprises should document the procedure for internal control and keep related records or materials to ensure the verifying, checking, inspecting by the concerned agencies. So I think this compliance more and more popular. The third is information technology advent. Managing electronic records has been shifted the way we carry out the application of documenting what we've done for future. But right now in China, many records managers began, for example, using the concept of records and archives as intellectual assets, increasing the value of records by applying information technology, adding business assets, property rights, contracts and agreements, certificates and other records. I explained this one. Before that, in the enterprise, some materials we do not regard as records. But now, everything related with the operation, we regard as records, and we must keep it safe. As for the IT's advent, I want to make some example. You know, the Kodak was listed as 18th of the top 500 global company in 1989, but dropped out the list 2006 due to their neglect of the strength of potency of the science and technology. Before that, the digital camera just maybe very little in terms of megabits. They do not trust it. They say the film is good in detail, but now it's developed. So the Kodak, the famous, dropped out the 500. But now he catch, and you know, they produced a lot of a camera. So someone said, originally it's a film company. Now it's a camera company. So the professional lesson to be learned is absolutely clear. We must pursue and accept a new while maintaining archival and record management fundamentals in order to develop new approaches in electronic environments. As Professor Greiner said, management practice that works well in one phase may bring on the crisis in another. In other words, the solution for one situation may often cause a different problem in new circumstances. And I can say that with China's proverb or idiom, that stubborn individuals make marks, they are both seeking a lost sword in the river. It's famous in the 刻舟求剑 in China, which means time change. You also keep the nothing to change. This is the first part. The second part is exploration based on the new concept and technology. We have a lot of change, so I just mention one thing. That is the requirement of a business records management. We issued these standards in 2009. The standards design is based upon the good experience distilled from 50 years of business records management practice of China and some systematic management principle borrowed from the ISO 9000 series quality management system and the modern concept of asset of records showed in ISO 15489. The standards also include the following situational observation based on the rethinking records management. We also draw something like a principle. Archival resources within that asset concept. For organizational institution, we emphasize leadership first. For the staff accountability, we think that the responsibility is held should by all employees, because every document produced not in the record management the office, just from all of the leadership and staff. For the direction of strategy, we emphasize informationization, so on and on. And also the standards main consideration and the significance are a little bit shared. For example, from the focus on record management itself to one on servicing the business. Originally, our work mostly focused on the records arrangement, classification, appraisal, something like that. But now, we want to make a good environment for the record management, so we focus change. And another, for example, from a focus on the preservation to one on servicing corporate needs, such as assisting the evidence and information needs of businesses, added value, operation, production, maintenance, management, and so on. And as for the record management to CSR, this morning, Hanning and Didier mentioned. So, in my opinion, although the draft of the ISO 26000, which is a CSR's number, international standards number, the guidance on social responsibility, did not even mention record management. We can gather from these 7 principles that they all need good record management to support, demonstrate, and prove the company has observed the principle in governance and the performance. In this standard, they say the 7 principles: accountability, transparency, ethical behavior, respect for stakeholder interest, respect for the rule of law, respect for international norms of behavior, and respect for human rights. We say the 7 principles. As we can make clear, if you want to keep this principle, you have no records how to prove. So I think maybe good record management also contribute to the CSR. And for now, although we have some new standards, but I know an important step in the implementation of the standard is to promote and publicize it among the enterprise, where the top leaders, managers, and the staff are aware of the understand and significance of records management in consolidating the company's business management and sustaining development. I mean, not only the record manager to get familiar with the standard, the leaders, the staff also have to learn the standards. This is a briefing of the standards. For example, in point 4, which is a general provision in point 4, said, properties and functions of records. Records are assets and resources, sources of business knowledge and information, while records management is the basic management of corporation. So we want to set the concept that let the top leader accept. Good record management is not good for us. Us means the record manager. It's good for you. So here I make an example. Once I went to the largest power plant in the Mongolia of China to inspect. I chatted with the leader of the plant that for 1,000 years history record was in a unique position for preserving culture and continue running something. I said the importance of record management. And I said to him, for example, at the rear of any temple, there will be a depository of Buddhist scripture. That is an institutional system of the temple. I mean, if a temple has something like a record office, is running a big plant mustn't need a record office. So when I say something about the importance, the head of the plant gave me a title. He said, "You are a real preacher." Record management preacher. So everywhere, one of the functions is a preacher, to be a preacher. And also, we made some clear comparisons. I'm sorry. For the quality management, they have 8 principles, but it's a supplier and customer not meet. But for the record management standards, the supplier and the customer are the same. Why? The supplier is, for example, leader or staff. They must give the document to file to you, and then their successor want to use the information, so they become the customer. So the benefit the same. So we through this way to convince the leader you should put importance on the record management. For the last part, a briefing. Here we have 3 examples. One is a comprehensive archival and a record service. The major characteristic is a comprehensive, this example. Here, through advocacy of a business archives, the function of records management and the service covers all corners of the business, even staff's family. So if you want to understand in detail, just see my papers. So this company do a good job of record management. Before 10 years ago, they only 8 staff, but now they have 40 to 50 staff in the business archive. So they make the record as a product. So every part of the company, before if they have something new, they want to consult if some record to support their works. You can see. Even the family, they got a family archives class. You see, the staff are very actively enrolled in the family archives class. The second is record-based knowledge management. This example shows they digitized old record and developed application software to analyze the data to support the business directly. So I'm very sorry. The third is in-depth exploration of data archiving. The record management is successfully involved into the PDM system. You know, in enterprise we have a ERP system, PDM system, and have a CRS SCM system, etc. So for this data, how can we deal with is that records or not? So this company do something new to archiving digital. They archive the data. Finally, I think that here are some of the enlightenment thinking from the Deruk, who said that the man who focuses on contribution, who takes the responsibility for the result, no matter how junior, is the most literal sense of the phrase top management. That means that rapid management, although they're not within the main sector of the enterprise, should consider themselves top management, and provided they do their best and think ahead, they should have confidence and self-esteem. So I follow his metaphor that we can image three records managers. The first, I am reluctant to be a document collector. The second, I'm skilled and understand technically every part of my work. The third, I am administrating information, knowledge, and historical treasure that are essential to running of the business. So in managerial sense, true records management obviously means that one must think beyond the current situation to be a real and qualified manager. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。ワンさんに質問がございますか？ここはもうちょっと確認しておきたいというご質問ありませんか？はい。
浅野と申します。先生が副市長を務めていらっしゃるこの経済詐欺答案業務指導士なんですが、こちらは人数はどのくらいの規模で、あとこの組織全体として企業に対してどういう働きかけを行っているか、もう少し詳しく教えてください。
Well, we're just 12, and we do some investigation, make some policy for some analysis, and to collect some problems that record management face, and we'll make some direction, make some opinions, something like that.
他にございますか？よろしいですか？ OK, thank you. 次の発表者はビジネスアーカイブズのためのナショナルストラテジー、イングランドとウェールズと題して、イギリスの国立公文書館でビジネスアーカイブズアドバイスマネージャーをしておられる、アレックス・リッチーさんにお話しいただきます。小冊子の24ページから25ページにご紹介がありますのでご覧ください。
Konnichiwa.
In the summer of 2009, the National Strategy for Business Archives was launched at a parliamentary reception in London. The launch was attended by a wide range of business and archival representatives, and the speakers included the Governor of the Bank of England, and the chairman of the major British clothing retailer Marks & Spencer. The launch was the culmination of 5 years' work by interested parties, including the Business Archives Council and the National Archives of the United Kingdom, to produce an agreed plan to promote the care and to increase awareness of the value of business records. The year 2009 marked the moment when the planning ended and the implementation phase of the project began. Since then, there has been a process whereby aspiration has been transformed into action and achievement. My own involvement only began at this time, even though I have had a long association with business records, particularly in the shipbuilding industry, and I became the dedicated Business Archives Advice Manager at the National Archives. As such, I am responsible for taking forward the strategy with our partners and in such matters in which the National Archives is best equipped to act. In January 2011, a parallel national strategy for business archives in Scotland was launched at a reception in Edinburgh, and since that time there has been close cooperation between the implementation groups of the two strategies. Before we consider the goals of the strategies, let us look for a moment at the current state of the corporate archive sector in the UK. The number of businesses that are known to make proper provision for their archives is around 80. Among the 100 largest companies, as defined by the London Stock Exchange, about 20 companies have such arrangements. Corporate archives are particularly strong in the banking and retail sectors, especially in the area of luxury goods. After that, with the exception of beverages, there is no other single strong sector. Increasingly, businesses are employing qualified professional archivists, but there is still a strong tradition of long-serving employees who bear the title of archivist on a courtesy basis. Many business archivists are members of the Business Archives Council, the Business Records Group of the Archives and Records Association, or are members of an informal group of retail archivists that meets occasionally, mainly in London. But some business archivists find themselves isolated, either by geography or because the sector in which they operate is so small. Insurance company archivists used to have a dedicated group, but now there are only 2 such companies with archivists in post. Outside of the known world of business archives, there may be further arrangements for the care of archives of which we remain unaware. In my own experience, random scraps of information have led me to several interesting discoveries. So, the UK corporate archive sector is not uniform, not always robust, and not always connected within itself. One has to remember that the UK archive sector as a whole is small, and that corporate archives exist on the edge of it. Nevertheless, there are signs of healthy growth, which I will come to later. The 2 strategies share 4 strategic goals: to raise awareness among businesses of the value of their archives, and to give guidance and support. There is strong evidence that many companies have realized that their history, and therefore their archives, is a huge resource to be exploited, especially where the celebration of anniversaries are involved. Thus, Marks & Spencer made much of their 125th anniversary in 2009. Later this year, a new purpose-built archive will be opened for them on the campus of Leeds University. A less developed, but nonetheless interesting archive underpins the 75th anniversary of Buckland's holiday camps. And their brochure exploits the huge nostalgia and affection felt by their customers. That archive is still undeveloped, but until recently, its very existence was scarcely known. Our hope is that as one business exploits its heritage effectively, this will lead to emulation by others. Increase the number of corporate sector business archives and of business collections in public repositories. This is a particular challenge for two reasons. There are few incentives one can deploy to encourage the average business to run their own archives operation. But where the idea and the desire already exist within a business to exploit this resource, the strategy can guide companies in a positive way. A good example of a business rediscovering its archives is that of Selfridges, the London department store. Some years ago, the archives were looked after in-house by a retired employee. Then it was decided to deposit the collection with the History of Advertising Trust. By 2010, Selfridges decided that it wanted to have the collection back under its own control and readily accessible. Later this year, the company will open a new archive facility within its flagship London store. In this case, we can see some of the themes of the strategy in operation. The renewed appreciation and reuse of past heritage in today's conditions. The desire of the business to use the archive as a dynamic resource to inspire future innovation. However successful this strategy is in encouraging businesses to make their own arrangements, it will still be necessary for many collections to be looked after by the network of the UK's national, local and university repositories. These vary in the provision that they make for business records. Until now, they have been an effective safety net against outright loss of records. But in the current financial climate, we cannot assume that they will continue to welcome large collections with potentially low usage. It will be necessary to encourage new entrants in the field, or to hope that significant institutions will take greater responsibility. Third, raise the profile of business archives and promote wider usage. In the UK, business history has existed as a specialist discipline of interest to a very small constituency of practitioners. Yet business records chart wider trends in history and society and can be used in a variety of ways. This was recently illustrated in a television programme by the distinguished historian Neil Ferguson. The programme concerned the adoption of Western modes of dress throughout the world. The example he used was taken from the customer records of the London tailor, Henry Poole and Company. Their famous customer was none other than the Emperor Hirohito, when he was Crown Prince of Japan. So, Professor Ferguson made a point of global significance on the basis of the records of a small London firm, showing that business records can break out of the narrow field of use to which they have often been confined in the past. Fourth, raise standards in the care of business archives. This has been the goal that has been most quickly addressed by the strategy. A best practice website managing business archives was launched at the same time as the strategy. The website contains a range of information to help businesses manage their archive collections. It is aimed at company personnel with no prior knowledge or expertise in archive management, as well as more experienced practitioners. The site features case studies of the use of business archives, a table of companies with professionally managed archives, a diary of business archives events, as well as a range of other links and professional information. Finally, I would like to consider what has changed and what has been achieved since the launch of the strategies. First, the strategies exist, and that in itself is important. Issues that have been discussed randomly in the past, and often in response to a sudden crisis, have now been defined and addressed. The number of people with an interest in business archives and history is modest, and they have often existed as separate groupings. Now they have something that binds their interests together and gives their views greater weight. Second, in my experience, business has been flattered and business archivists helped by the recognition, at a national level, of the value of their archives, and by the interest and concern of the national archives. Until now, corporate archives have existed at the edge of the archive sector. Now they may feel that they have a new and higher status. Third, UK corporate archives are moving forward. There are more of them, and they are making better provision for their archives. Aquascutum, the luxury clothes retailer, has recently opened a museum and archive, and their example has been followed by another clothes retailer, Dax Simpson Group. Both HSBC and Marks & Spencer will shortly have new premises for their archives. In spite of a challenging economic climate, businesses are more likely to establish or enhance their archives rather than to consider closure as a cost-saving measure. Of course, it would be optimistic to believe that we will always manage to preserve indefinitely all the corporate archives that exist at present. It is not in the nature of business for that to happen. However, there has been a shift in sentiment. In particular, businesses are increasingly recognizing their archives as a resource to exploit rather than a cost to bear. Fourth, there has been a coordinated response to business failures, administrations and takeovers. The strategy has seen the creation of a 7-person crisis response group who keep in touch through email and gather intelligence and coordinate action when business records are seen to be at risk. Swift intervention has ensured that administrators are aware of the wider interest that attaches to these assets and that advice and practical help about options for deposit is on offer. There is one area that was overlooked in the preparation of the strategy. It was perhaps so focused on being a national strategy that it had nothing to say about global companies with operations in the UK. Recently, the archivist of the Swiss pharmaceutical company Roche came to the National Archives and lectured about their history in the UK going back over 100 years. There is much in their central archives in Switzerland of relevance to British business, architectural and social history. How much may we find in the records of Japanese corporations that have been so prominent in Britain in recent years? That is perhaps a question that we may explore later. For now, I thank you for your kind attention. Arigato.
ありがとうございました。それではリッチーさんに対する、事実確認の質問ございますか？イギリスの国立公文書館は企業資料のなんていうかなビジネスアーカイブスの支援というか、それを国家的なレベルで戦略として取り上げて、一種のガイドラインを敷いているというのはとても、貴重な例だと思いますが、いかがでしょうか。
お話の周辺にある問題について初歩的な質問をさせていただきたいと思います。イギリスの東インド会社は世界でも最も巨大かつ効率的に運営された植民地企業であったと思います。このイギリス東インド会社には非常に整備されたスタッフ組織があり、有名なジョン・スチュアート・ミルの父親は、文書課の課長が務めたということを私どもは経済学説史等を通じて学んでおります。で、イギリス東インド会社のビジネスアーカイブについて、何らかのコメントを付け加えていただくことが、今日の議論の中で、可能かつ妥当であればその点を教えていただきたいと思います。
The East India Company records were kept in separately, and there was an India office library, which is now part of the British Library, and it's now part of the Asia Pacific and Oceania collections there. I sometimes use those records myself, so that those records are in part of the British Library, and they are on the site at St Pancras, which I still think of as being the new British Library, because I'm old enough to remember when you used to go to the British Museum to use the British Library.
よろしいでしょうか。そうです。他にございますか？はい。
今のご質問に関連するんですが、イギリスの旧植民地時代の例えばアジア諸国について言うと、例えば上海に各企業の事務所があって、シンガポール内日本なりに、出張所を置いて、仕事をされたこともあったり、それに関連して、イギリスの国の、お役人もそういうところに出張して仕事をされてたようなんですが、現在そういった歴史資料がイギリス本国だけじゃなくて、例えばシンガポールなり日本なりっていう各アジア諸国のナショナルアーカイブスにもたくさんの資料が保存されていて、そういったところと例えばイギリスのアーカイブスとの間で何か連携措置というか 例えば目録の共有会みたいなことは考えられていないでしょうか。
Yes, we feed information on business records into the National Register of Archives. There is a dedicated business index of the National Register of Archives, and all our information is drawn from repositories in the United Kingdom and throughout the world. So we have information from 500 repositories in other countries. Obviously the English-speaking world is better covered than other parts of the world, but basically if we know where there is information, we're happy to incorporate that information into the National Register of Archives. But some of the sort of great trading houses in the Far East, such as Jordan Matheson and John and Swires, we know that these records have been deposited for Jordan Matheson in Cambridge University Library and for Swires in the School of Oriental and African Studies, which is part of the London University. So if there is more material of which we should be aware, I would be happy for anybody to draw that to my attention.
他によろしいですか？で、他にございますか？じゃあ、私から質問よろしいですか？ OK？ 今のお話だと非常に古い歴史的なレコードですね。東インド会社とかジャーネン・マティスとかそういう非常に古いものはすでに、ナショナル・レジストリー・オフ・アーカイブスに載っていると。そして今イギリスの国立公文書館がナショナルストラテジーとして、作ったもののなんていうかしら対象というかそのターゲットっていうのはそういうよりももう少し新しいものというところに焦点があるのでしょうか。そうとは限らないどうでしょうか。
There are no limits to the material that we're interested in. You're quite right that we're dealing with businesses who have current as well as historical records, so from that point of view, yes, there is a more modern aspect to what we do. But part of my job is to advise on older material, and recently I received a request from somebody who had some dye books. Those are they had samples of dyes that were used in textile manufacture, and these were from the 18th century, and they were in poor condition. So they said, we want to find a suitable home for these things. Where should they go? So on the basis of what already exists and where the material came from in the first place, we can advise what is a suitable place of deposit. And because these records originated from a particular area of South London, we recommended a particular archive service that they get in touch with to deposit these records. So yes, we're dealing with records at the modern end and also sometimes at the very historical end.
ありがとうございました。他に何かありますか？よろしいですか？これリッチーさん、それじゃありがとうございました。これで午後の最初のセッションは終わります。これからやはり10分間休憩に入りますけれども、どうぞパネルディスカッションへのテーマ提言の用紙を、記入してくださいまして、どうぞ提出してください。今までもこの時点でたくさんご提案いただいてますけれども、かなり面白いパネルディスカッションになりそうな感じですので、どうぞよろしくお願いします。それでは今から10分間、そうですね、2時35分まで休憩にします。